Thank you. So I've done a lot of research in the last 9 days since we had a discussion to try and educate myself a little bit more on how parking garages work and on how they work. Pretty self-explanatory, right? But the development of a parking garage, creation of a parking garage. So I learned that cost per space is actually not the best measure, as it's a reflection of the efficiency of the space. So cost per space, we're looking at a cost per space estimate. We're fully aware we're talking about it, best estimate at this point. $40,973, $41,000 a space. But what I come to understand about parking garages is that a more, or almost a better way to determine bang for the buck is cost per square foot. So our cost per square foot, which again is on this form, or this executive summary, is $116, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. It's not a trick question. So the industry average is $35 to $65 per square foot for a structural garage. And that varies whether or not you're using union labor or not union labor, non-union labor. Non-union labor average is $51 per square foot. These assumptions are based on a 5-story garage, 10 feet each floor, which is similar to what we're doing here, correct? Another important metric is the parking efficiency. So square foot per space. What is I didn't see that on here in terms of what our proposed parking efficiency would be.
Obviously, these are, you've done a tutorial. I've gone through a tutorial, but I'm not the expert, and we have the expert here. So I think we should ask him to address that.
Yeah, we have, actually submitted in the handout that was, the PowerPoint that was provided last night. Our efficiency rate now is at 353 square feet per parking space. One thing that you need to understand about efficiency of parking space is it varies per type of structure. Above grade structure versus below grade structure.
Right, the typical above grade structure, the national average is 300 to 350 square feet per space, and then the mix above and below ground is 400 to 500 square feet per space.
Yeah, it's more like in the 325 for the above space.
Well, 350
Depending
the
on,
average.
it also affects
325.
the level of service
Right.
too. That's something else that we got to keep in mind.
So what's the structural efficiency of the proposed garage?
The structural efficiency,
Right.
I don't quite understand your question. What do you mean structural efficiency?
I'm aware that it's a metric used in the industry, which is the total construction cost divided by the total area of the structure, including stairs, elevators, and ramps, that the national average is 35 to 65 square feet.
35 to 65 square feet for the structure.
The structural efficiency.
Yeah.
Is that a term you're not familiar with?
Mr. Tom Clerk of Kennedy could address that.
Okay.
I may be able to answer your question. Let me just explain the pricing that you're looking at, the $29.9, and we have it priced at $116 a square foot. That's over the whole garage, the elevated structure as well as the below grade.
I got that, yeah.
We did at one point look at adding another floor to this garage, and we priced that, and it was $62 a square foot. So our elevated decks, if you would, are in the $62 to $65 square foot range.
So are you familiar with the term structural efficiency determining
I am not familiar with that term.
so it seems to me what the term structural efficiency refers to is, again, it's a metric of total construction cost divided by total area of structure, including stairs, elevators, and ramps. So it gives you an idea of, if your ramps are wider, if you have more elevators, if you don't have elevators, if you have more staircases throughout the thing. So it gives you it's the efficiency of the actual structure that
Right.
creates it. So, all right, I'm just trying to use couple days ago, 9 days ago, we were told not to compare apples to oranges.
Right.
I'm trying to compare apples to apples by using metrics that seem to be across wherever you're building or where you, so, okay. All right, maybe I'll get going here. Thank you. In terms of, have we gotten to a place where we're talking about ventilation systems and we're talking about design of those type of features?
In the preliminary design, once again, I wouldn't be the person who would be the best person to
Okay.
respond to that. It would be the designer.
What we've got so far is a square footage of below-grade space. We know the below-grade space has to be ventilated. It also has to have special fire suppression system to it. And based on the schematic level, and I recall a very preliminary schematic level, we're able to evaluate the square foot cost basis on that.
And what is that?
Defer to you guys.
For the, the cost for the ventilation itself, I don't.
I don't know, whatever he was just talking about.
The MEP systems for below grade.
I don't know, I don't have that detail with me. To
Sure.
say exactly what that is, but it would be in the $116 a square foot. I can say the only ventilation that we have right now is in the basement area. There's no ventilation in the upper floors.
And so we have, what does this garage look like? What's the basement floor look like? What's down there?
It's cast in place slab, cast in place walls, and the underside of the ceiling be cast in place as well.
So, but there's parking spaces down there, there's utilities down there, and it follows straight up?
Yes.
Okay. 5 stories total? 1 underground, 4 above?
It is, yes, 4 stories above.
And 1 underground. And it makes more sense financially to go underground than to do 5 above?
I think if you go back and take a look
I think he said it was 114 a square foot for the underground, and he had said previously it's 65, 66 square feet, cost per square feet to go to the top deck.
If
Which
you go-
means half the price for another.
Just to be clear on that, that's, if we were to, there's an efficiency, if we were just to put one elevated deck, it would be more than $62 a square foot.
Sure.
You get, the $62 a square foot is if we went to, at one point, we were looking at adding another level to give another X amount of spaces. So that's what we, at that point, we're in efficient construction, so those added floors are at the reduced rate.
Got it.
Makes sense.
But it seems like the most expensive floor is the subterranean floor.
That's correct. That's correct.
Not because it's the first floor, but because it's subterranean.
That's correct.
So my question is, why was that decision made to go 1 floor under rather than 5 above?
Let's move that up to it.
In part to accommodate the civic space that we talked about, that will be part of the garage, in the hopes that it will not be a utilitarian building surrounded by residential areas. And we also made a conscious effort not to have it to be too massive, both out of consideration for the adjoining residential neighborhood, particularly across Revere Road.
There's a 15-story building standing next to it. You're telling me it makes a difference whether the parking garage is 4 stories or 5 stories?
We believe that a parking garage that's as low as possible and fits into the fabric of the city is more aesthetically pleasing. The decision about a 15-story building was a decision to achieve density as the first project in the building, in the downtown area, and that the 15-story building has a purpose, a residential purpose, not a parking purpose.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, I kind of understand what you're saying, but I don't see aesthetically, what's the price difference? Tell me the price difference between 5 above and 4 above and 1 under. Tell me what the price difference is.
5 above. Yeah.
It's not something we can analyze this quick. Would be, obviously, if you're eliminating the
Would you
basement.
mind just speaking into the
Yes.
microphone?
I think I overheard you say it's not something you can analyze. this
It's
quick.
not something that.
So I won't put you on the
Yeah.
spot. I'd ask Bill if you could provide for our next meeting, the cost difference between 5-story above-ground garage and what you're proposing here. So I guess I just need one other set of numbers to
I
compare.
think there's one point to that, though. What you have to remember, too, is below grade actually provides more parking than the typical floor level. So to remove the basement level, you'd actually end up having, to meet the 730 car count goal, you would end up with more than 5 levels above. You start getting into 6, you'd actually have 5 and
And that would be a function of structural efficiency that I was talking about earlier. We take into account the square footage of ramps and elevators and all that. So, and I don't have that number to analyze. I'd love to see the structural efficiency difference between a 5-story above ground and a 4-story above ground and one under. Because then I would be able to compare apples to apples rather than, right?
Well, above grade parking is approximately about 325 to 335 parking spaces. However, on this garage, you also have to take into consider the entry exit ramps, the location of
Right,
parking.
again, that's
revenue
the
access
structural efficiency.
control. Yes, it all comes into play.
Right.
And the lower level is, like I said, it's a larger footprint, provides more parking space. So you would not be able to replace all those parking spaces with one.
Okay, I'd still like to see the price difference in the.
Because the upper levels, the typical floors are maximized right now. It's as simple as you can get, 60-foot wide bay, and bay parking, 90-degree parking. You can't get any more efficient than that. The only way you can increase your efficiency is by decreasing the level of service, squeezing down the drive-out bay from 24 feet to 22 feet, or reducing the width of the parking stall from 9 foot to 8'6". Those all affect the level of service, which I don't think you want to do for a parking structure that's going to be used by the general public.
Well, I'm not suggesting we narrow it, but again, if I had a figure of the structural efficiency, that would be exactly what it tells me is how many spaces you're squeezing out of the square footage. How many, what's the size of the spaces? What's the square footage being used by ramps and elevators and other maintenance equipment and maintenance rooms? So I mean, that would be, I think,
Right. And there's very little on the concept that we have right now. We actually pulled the stair tower out. The only real space that's being utilized is one egress stair coming down. So with regards to structural efficiency, we're about as efficient as you can get for this type of parking.
right. So I guess that's why, and I'll say it again perhaps the 5th time, but I guess that's why it's important to understand the structural efficiency of the building, right? To know how we're maximizing those spaces.
Right. And you can go through on this table, you can go level by level, take the square footage area and divide by the number of parking spaces and level, get the structural efficiency for each level. The typical level would be the 42,500 divided by 132. That would be your typical structural efficiency for a typical floor plan. It's going to be different for slab on grade, but for the grade level, because that's where you have your entry exits, you're going to lose some parking spaces there. And there is a small office area parking lot.
Right.
But again, you can figure that one out as well. You have 87 spaces on grade, on the typical floor, you have 132. I'm not going to count there, but
Well, if you guys can provide those numbers,
that's your efficiency.
as follow-up. Are you familiar, Wes, with the International Parking Institute?
IPI, yes.
Yeah. They're world's largest and leading professional organization for professionals in the parking industry.
I understand.
They say that to be as accurate as possible when budgeting for a garage, it is best to understand the project in terms of parking efficiency as well as structural efficiency. End quote. So they were one of the resources that I use to try and educate myself. So it would be very helpful if we could get the structural efficiency numbers to compare the different options that were previously presented. Looks like we're going in one direction, but when I'm told that the reason why we've chosen one path to go 4 above and 1 under as opposed to 5 above is aesthetics, I'd like to know what the cost of that aesthetic is.
Understood.
And I'll tell you whether or not, I get a vote on this, I'll tell you the my vote whether or not I think it's worth the cost to have
I
four
think
stories.
aesthetics and massing are very important when it comes to parking structures, because they are very large buildings. You have to have a certain length for the ramps, things of that nature. And they can get very big very fast. They can become overbearing. And I think, you know, going back to my knowledge of this project, one of the reasons for going below grade is because of the frontage on Revere Road and the sensitivity to the neighbors.
Right, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't know that I fully agree, because there'll be a 15-story building, right? They actually connected, aren't they sharing a wall?
Yes.
So if you have a building that's 4 stories next to a 15-story building, or you have a building that's 5 stories next to a 15-story building, I don't think you're gonna notice that much if you live on Revere Road. You're gonna notice a 15-story building. Like, oh, but it's only 4 stories. I'm sorry, I have to mentally grasp that some more, but I don't see that as something we should be paying more money to achieve.
I think you have to look at it in context of the frontage along Revere Road.
But we don't know that someone isn't gonna build a 15-story building on the other side, right? On the R3 lot. So then you have 2 15-story buildings. What the hell difference does it make whether it's 4 or 5 stories in the middle of a parking garage? I mean, we don't know what I think it's what R3, what R3 is going to be yet in terms of development. It could be a 15-story building. So
I can't speak to it.
I can't do it either. It's future.
If I may, Counselor, there couldn't be a 15-story building unless it could park itself. Now, if a 15-story building was placed in that corner, I think you would have a underground parking. You bring in minors to do it because they have to park themselves. R2 and R3 both are required to park themselves. That's why we are anticipating 5 over pedestal in both those sites. Then we also have another conversation about density on the entirety of that lot. You have a building with 15 stories. It's actually very narrow. It's got about a 13,500 footprint. So it's set closer to Cottage Street, as you know. It is not as close to the Revere Road side. So it's also where it is.
Sure, so 5 over pedestal on the undeveloped lot, if that's what we're thinking. 5 over pedestal means 6 stories, right?
5 over pedestal would mean 6 stories if, in fact, they can park it.
Which they have to.
On the sides.
Which they have to, as we said. So we're talking about a 6-story building.
Yeah. But the
I don't think that makes much, again, that doesn't paint me this beautiful aesthetic picture that the garage should only be 4 stories because there's going to be a 6-story building here and a 15-story building here. I don't see it. So, I mean, we'll look at the price of it.
Yeah, but also you are acknowledging there's a lot more spaces that can make it on that underground level than above ground, right? You understand there's an additional number of spaces. That
I do, which is a structural efficiency, which I don't have the number in front of me that they're going to
I get you,
provide.
and I'm
Yeah.
fine with that. I just want to make sure that we're not saying each floor, each stack
The subterranean floor is bigger.
is much better.
I get it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So Bill, we have this projected revenue stream to support the garage's ongoing maintenance, right?
I'm sorry, I projected revenue?
Revenue stream to support the garage's ongoing maintenance.
Yes.
Right. Okay, what happens if that revenue stream falls short?
Well, the projection is predicated on what the expected volume will be. Even if it was just volume that comes back, even if you were to assume, I don't know if you looked at any of that, Craig, it's projected on the, not only the occupancy that's there, but on the traffic that's already there in terms of, when I say traffic, I mean volume of people coming into the area for the restaurants. I didn't do the financial model, so that's something I have to look to see to give you an answer.
Well, my question isn't what the number is. I'm saying policy-wise, what will the city do if the garage is not self-sufficient? In terms of
The
revenue?
city would have to subsidize it, I guess, is the answer.
So we need to be very confident that our revenue projections to support the garage. that's what's Craig provided us with, right? Is,
Counselor, are you referring to the operating
correct.
maintenance of it?
Mm-hmm.
The assumption we've made in the forecasting model for the DIF financing is that we have not included any excess revenues from the parking fees. We've assumed that the parking revenues will meet the parking maintenance requirements. Those levels are, in terms of overall parking pricing, those are reasonable and within the means. They're not zero, but they're also not $30 a day like they are in Boston. We do know that the parking revenues, less the maintenance costs, would not support the capital costs of the garage under current pricing schemes. That's the assumption that's been made in here, so we've zeroed that out. The revenue,
In the current bill? I'm sorry.
the parking, you can't charge enough for parking to cover all the capital expenses, to build the garage itself.
Of course.
If it was Boston pricing where you're getting $39 a day, you could certainly get at least, if not all of the cost paid, a good chunk of it. What we've done in
Our grade even $7.50 per day, correct? $150 per month.
if that's the rate that's decided on for the parking.
Well, it has to be. Right.
I don't think a parking pricing policy for future parking in the garage has been established yet, as far as I know.
Other than as part of the two LDAs.
Right, it's
Right, so-
$150 a month.
That's
For those
all.
few parking spaces. The rest, whether it's on an hourly rate basis, night rates, monthly rates, that's to be determined. But to be conservative in the model, what we've assumed is that that will be sufficient to cover the maintenance costs. And I'm comfortable that even from very reasonable rates by Quincy standards, that can be done. Because I'm not the expert in terms of those parking maintenance costs on a per day basis, but I think to be conservative, what we have not assumed is that there's excess parking revenue that'll go into the DIF fund, as there has been before in the past.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I have some other questions for Bill right now. The reason why I asked that is because obviously we have a poor track record as a city of maintaining our garage, right? The Ross Garage had to be torn down due to poor maintenance, poor upkeep, right?
That's correct.
So we have to make sure we maintain this garage, and the whole thing falls apart, right? 'Cause you
That is,
jamming all these people downtown. There's going to be explosive growth down there. You're going to have office space, 15 stories of living, east of Chestnut, west of Chestnut, the LBC project. If we have to tear down this new garage, we're in a bad spot. So,
I won't be there for it.
yeah, no, right, well, if I have my way, we'll have stopped paying you all the time before that. So I looked at some case studies of what other cities have done and experiences they've had. In March of 2016, Racine, Wisconsin, which is a city of just about our size, about 80,000 folks, they determined that they couldn't support their garage any longer despite an 80% occupancy rate, up to an 80% occupancy rate. And they, as we did with the Ross Garage, were contemplating just tearing the thing down, even though they had this high demand. How do we maintain the level of maintenance on the garage, especially if, in a worst case scenario, the revenue stream dries up, and now it's as it was with the Ross Garage, because we weren't utilizing Ross Garage. This was the justification for why we could tear it down and it wouldn't affect parking problems. It was underutilized. There's plenty of parking in the downtown. People are parking elsewhere.
Correct. I can't speak to the Racine, Wisconsin
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
demonstration, but you have quite appropriately raised this issue before, and it is the administration's intention to have this garage be in private management under an arrangement or contract with the city to ensure that it receives the dedicated resources with a company that is in the business of doing this. And these are some of the discussions we have had with Desmond, who obviously works with the major companies that do this around the country.
Okay, so talking about that maintenance contract, in 2008,
And operating as well.
and operating, right, in 2008, Morristown, New Jersey, spent $16 million on an 800-car garage to support the same thing that we're doing here, new growth in their downtown. Morristown is 30 miles from New York City, so they're in a competitive market, similar to we are with Boston, so construction prices are higher. Obviously, that was 10 years ago. But during their deliberations in Morristown, New Jersey, they were presented with growth projections for the impact that the garage would have. And they were told at that time, when they voted for the $16 million to build an 800-space garage, that would result in $125 million in residential and commercial growth in new development in the downtown. Do we have any similar projections for if we build a garage for $37, $38 million in the downtown, what the growth projection is?
Great.
In the diff model that we have utilized, we've looked at development of not only the existing properties, those that are permitted, and those that have been discussed in terms of potentially coming forward in the future. And that growth is sufficient. The tax income, the diff income, the incremental property tax
Just
impact
pays for
is
it.
more than adequate to pay for the garage.
So separate and apart from paying for the garage, what's the growth projection? How much, so in Morristown, New Jersey, they did a projection, you spend $16 million on an 800 space garage in your downtown, the projections at that time were that would reap $125 million in private investment in commercial and residential growth. What's our projection? We spend,
I can go, you do.
Councilor Calmucci, the cost estimates for the two approved projects in the Hancock lot are $90 million. That does not include two additional development sites, R2 and R3. But that's the
so
current.
what would our projections on R2 and R3 be?
Well, those would be the 5-over pedestal.
Oh, but those don't matter because they park themselves, so this garage doesn't really spur that development. Right.
I would think the overall redevelopment value of those parcels is going to be greatly increased versus what they could fetch for now in the open market.
Because there's a 4-story parking garage next door?
Because there's, over $100 million in public and private investment right next door. In new buildings, new
Which is
residences,
a
new stores,
parking garage.
and also a parking garage.
Okay. All right, so we don't have a number projection, just the 90 million in terms of what?
That's the estimated construction cost of both the Chestnut Place and the LBC proposals.
Okay. All right, Bill, back to the ongoing maintenance and a contract, operations and maintenance contract. So Morristown, New Jersey, and nearby New Brunswick, New Jersey, similar time periods created municipal garages to jumpstart downtown growth. They also formed quasi-government agencies to design, to build, and to manage their garages, quasi-agency being a parking authority. What was the analysis for Quincy as to why we won't form a parking authority to build, design, and manage the garage?
I don't know that there was any consideration or non-consideration, to be honest with you, Council.
Okay. Is it something we can look at?
Not to my knowledge, we did not look at that.
No, can we look at that? If no one looked at it before,
Are
can
you
you ask
asking,
me?
can we look at that?
Yeah.
I'm certainly could look at it, yes.
Well, there's benefits to forming a parking authority, right?
To see what the benefits are?
Yeah, I mean, there are benefits.
Yes. Okay, we certainly could look at it, I'm just not aware that we ever did.
A parking authority could finance the garage themselves, rather than have the debt go onto the city. It could go onto the agency.
But it's obviously something that needs to be researched. The Commonwealth used to have a parking authority, and they merged it with the Convention Center Authority. So I can't speak to what the merits, what the pros and cons are of creating a parking authority.
maybe I could ask Wes, if you could speak to that. Have you, being an expert in the parking industry, have you ever worked in any municipalities or government agencies that had parking authorities?
Yes, a lot of them have various different types of parking, downtown parking authorities of different types. And the parking authorities themselves don't necessarily finance the.
Well, some of them do.
What they look at.
Like revenue bonds,
Revenue.
30-year revenue bonds,
Pardon me?
like 30-year revenue bonds, right?
Not the parking authorities, no, not the ones that I've been associated with.
Okay.
What they basically do is deal with the on and off street parking in the community. They look at the management of it, they look at the rates of it, and also the maintenance of it, discussion about supply and demand, need for more parking, control of parking, a lot of the discussion that you brought up earlier about enforcement, things of that nature.
Which actually touches upon a point. Every community that I looked at that had, or nearly every community, that had created and built a garage, whether through a quasi-government agency, a parking authority, or themselves, just about every community that I looked into also put in place street parking meters to create turnover and force use of the garage, as well as a revenue stream to manage the maintenance of the garage. So I haven't heard that in terms of what the downtown's going to look like when we create this garage. Are we also going to put in meters? What's our plan here?
I can't speak to that.
These are all options that we are going to look at as part of our plan that we've talked about. It's all integrated. Your research is correct in that there is obviously an interconnection between whether or not parking meters are available in the city. There's a culture change because the city has, or the visitors to the downtown area have benefited from free parking for various periods of time. So, however, you are correct that is something that we need to and intend to look at as part of this overall plan
And when do we intend to do that?
over the summer.
Okay. So, and again, part of that, not only to drive parking into the garages, but also to create a revenue source to help back up the maintenance of the garage through these.
Exactly. Not only that, but it's important to balance your on and off street parking. That's one of the problems in downtown Boston. You see congestion of traffic. It's people with circle blocks because they don't want to pay the $35 and $40 to pull in the garage. Granted, we're not charging $40 here to park in the garage, but there needs to be a balance. I'm working with the city of Greenfield right now. They're going through the exact same thing. And their parking authority looked at you pay everywhere you park in the city. And that's a big part of what Quincy needs to look at in this next step this summer.
Which, I mean, you have to, and whether we wanted to or not, it's not like you can have a garage and then have all this free on-street parking. You can't plan around it.
You may, Mr. Chairman, to the council. I think Councilman Pavalucci raises a lot of good questions. He's one of the councilors that was here during the street work sections. And it's my experience that through the street works program as a master developer for the whole downtown, we contemplated between 6 and 8 garages being constructed over a period of time. I know there were discussions about what was the best way to manage that, because all of a sudden the city was going to be owning well over 3,000 spaces in multiple facilities, spread in multiple geographies. As we all know, the street works plan did not pan out. In 2014, we terminated that relationship. After that, we engaged Red Gate Real Estate Advisors to give us a gut check on Quincy Center redevelopment, whether it's still worth moving forward, whether there's still a market there for redevelopment. That led to the
Can we,
adoption
with all due respect, can we
of
have
the
it back
urban
to the
renewal
years?
plan number 4 about a year ago, and now here we are with the first garage. We still have a MEPR certificate of over 3,000 new parking spaces to be developed. Downtown is fully developed as it was contemplated. Now, as far as a parking authority, I did look at a little bit of that.
Rob, with all due respect, that's like 10 questions ago.
Yeah.
The question that I
Well, right,
proposed that was answered
Question.
adequately have something to add about the meters?
Not on the meters, but on the parking authority, you mentioned there's benefits to that. One of the benefits of a parking authority is the ability to raise funds and also the ability to acquire and dispose of land. At this time, the urban renewal plan, as well as the DIF program, provide both of those tools to the city, which is the land disposition, eminent domain powers, as well as the local financing for public improvements. So some of the main benefits of the parking authority as we sit today with the first garage, we are covered with those tools in the tool belt. As we get beyond this garage into other parking facilities, whether it's in the Ross garage, whether it's on-street parking.
The point of that was to be a cleaner way to finance, so that the city's success isn't tied to a sinking ship. If the garage goes down, the city sinks or swims with it. If the garage went down and there was a parking authority who pulled the bonds for it, there were revenue bonds, the private market who is buying those bonds would tell you whether or not the garage works, because they wouldn't buy the bonds if the garage doesn't work. So it's an added benefit of having the private market tell you that you have the right number of spaces, you have the right revenue projections, and if it sunk and it failed, it wouldn't bring the taxpayer down with it.
Yeah, so a year ago, we devised a redevelopment program for the Hancock lot that contemplated 4 development sites. We've had 2 developers, or we've essentially 50% leased the Hancock lot without, constructing anything or even passing the current DIF bond that's before you. I think that's a pretty strong signal that at least the private market believes we're on the right track.
Well, it wasn't a question about, it's not an esoteric question about whether or not the downtown is heading in the right direction. It's a question about the cost of the garage. Plain and simple. Plain and simple.
To clarify a point earlier about revenues, parking revenues in a DIF district can be included as DIF revenue for the future bonding capacity. Those parking revenues are not currently contemplated in the RQG model. The thought and the belief is those revenues will fund that operations and maintenance. Just a minute.
Good night, Council, through Chairman. Regarding the bonding, Councilor, for a parking authority, the city would still have to back that. Those would not have the rating ability to go up and purchase $80 million. So even though parking
Well, the parking authority wouldn't be seeking $80 million, they'd be seeking $40 million. And there are other municipalities whose parking authorities sought revenue bonds, 30-year tax-free revenue bonds, to support the design, the construction, and the operation and maintenance of the garage.
though, even though they're revenue bonds, they still have to be backed by the city. They still need some sort of authority behind them. So we'd still be.
That's why you create the quasi-authority.
But what if that crashes?
Listen, we haven't talked about, so you've done work on the parking authority? You've analyzed whether or not financially it makes sense to have a parking authority?
No,
Okay, so then that was the question I asked. Have we analyzed it? Can't they raise money? You've answered the question. I'd like to move on. Is that okay?
thank you.
So, all this, I asked about the meters, right? So we use that revenue source to help maintain the garages, right? So the industry average for the annual maintenance is $500 per, you know, from the west, right, sorry. So what's the industry average for maintenance per space is about $500, is that?
That seems high.
Okay.
What we do for every garage, we do a life cycle analysis and we bring it back in the present day and distribute on a per space basis. And what we've been seeing for this type of structure, precast parking structure, with a partial below grade, I would say this one would be closer to $300 or $350 range in the MEP systems.
And you giving us the 50-year lifespan?
Yes, we look at, for example, we take it out, you're looking at replacing elevators every 20 years, we bring that back to present day value. Joint replacements, all types of things, plus daily, weekly, and monthly maintenance as well.
50 years lifespan, or what's?
Oh, for the garage?
Yeah,
Oh, wow, that's hard to
not
say.
you, sir. You will live far longer.
Yeah, I hope so. That's hard to say, actually. One of my favorite garages is right in downtown Boston. It's going to be 100 years old in 2024. It's the Motormark garage. And it's a beautiful garage. So to say that this is gonna last 50 years, I think it's gonna last longer than that, because the technology that we use today is even significantly better than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're using stainless steel, there's all types of corrosion inhibitors, and we know how to design the garages better just from learning from past bad examples, such as the Ross garage.
So, what would you give for, you're a consultant, what's the life of the garage?
Ideally, I'd like to see this thing last 75 to 80 years,
And that's,
possibly longer.
and that's at $300 a space per year in maintenance? Obviously it'll go up, but that's the average?
I would put that up.
Throw that out there.
I think that's a reasonable number, yes.
Okay.
We'll know that exact number when we're done with the design, because at that point in time, we'll know exactly how many linear foot of joint units we have, how many elevators we have.
Because the joint seals, that's one of the big maintenance costs, is you have to,
It is,
you have to
absolutely.
reseal them so that they don't.
Yeah, precast parking structures have significantly more joints than post-tension parking structures.
So now, and I'm almost done. The,
342 square feet, that's the efficiency if you go above a 6-level, 5-story parking structure, which is higher than the average. And the reason for that is because of the length of the garage. The longer the garage you have, the more parking you can have per bay. And the shorter the garage, the turning bays start cutting into that efficiency.
got it. So, on this executive summary, the precast budget number, option number 3 from Lee Kennedy, which again is an estimate. It seems incredibly high to me, in that it's $116 per square foot when the national average for this type of garage is $57 per square foot. And the cost per space, again, national average is $19,000 per space. We're looking at $41,000 per space. And I don't understand what's driving the costs up so much higher than what the national average is.
Well, first of all, the garage that you're looking at for those estimates is not just an above-grade garage. It's also partly a below-grade garage.
Right.
And do you want me to go through the examples?
So you're telling me if we dump the subterranean floor and do 5
Correct.
stories, that we would get closer to the $57 per square foot, almost half, or more than half? Yeah. More than half.
I wouldn't say half, but there's certain components of the parking facility.
Well, the problem with comparing this to an average garage is it's not, there are costs in here for utilities and soil disposals and things that may not be in those numbers.
Well, that's why it's an average, though. Right.
Well, again, as I stated before, we're at $116 a square foot on this garage, which includes a basement level.
Yeah.
When we did the analysis for the elevated levels, we were at $62 a square foot. So we would never get, if we were to, we won't be below 62 on this garage.
I'm sorry, you won't be what?
We could, you asked the question if we could cut the 116 in half. We won't be able to because of some of the site encumbrances that we have on this site, which is probably more than an average, well, I know it's more than an average garage due to the site constraints.
So it doubles the cost?
It
The
doesn't
national
double the
average
cost.
is $57 per square foot, $19,000 per space. We're more
Understood.
than double that here.
We are more than double that because we have a basement level and we have utilities relocations that we typically don't see in a garage of this
Environmental conditions.
environmental conditions. There are a lot of things on this site that attribute to that square foot cost.
Right, but even if it was a fully, so let's just establish a base, right? Above ground parking structures are less expensive to build than below ground parking structures, right?
Correct.
Okay. And a partially above, partially below ground structure is more expensive to build than a fully above ground structure, right?
Yes.
And it's also less expensive to build than a fully underground parking structure, right? Okay. So the national average that I'm citing is for a above ground structure. And you're telling me that even if we went fully to an above ground structure, we still couldn't come close to the national average of $57 per square foot,
I'm not saying we wouldn't come close to that, I'm saying we won't be at that average, we'll be on the high side, just because in West, I think now might be appropriate to explain.
Yeah, no, I can speak. We have offices throughout the United States, and we maintain our own cost databases too. So to compare the New England area to a national cost average, I think is unfair for this project, because you can build a garage in Indiana, for example, significantly less than you can build a garage in the greater Boston area. And part of the reason is because of the amount of construction that's going on in this area. That drives the cost up.
Fair enough. So the most expensive municipalities in the country to build a garage, of the 12 largest cities in the country. San Francisco at $70 per square foot. New York at $75 per square foot. Chicago at $67 per square foot. And then the Boston average, which I would argue should be in the same wheelhouse on, is $67 per square foot. Now that's for an above ground garage.
And where's that number coming from?
This is from the Victoria Transport Policy Institute, January 2017 report on transportation costs and benefit analysis of parking garages.
Not that I want to dispute that, but we right now, we have 20 ongoing projects, and we have a number of below-grade parking structures in the South Boston area, and we also have a number of above-grade. We're actually doing a project together where, depending on the size of the garage, the efficiency of the garage, the size of the footprint you can work with, the degree of architecture, it all comes into play with regards to those numbers. And within the Boston area, we're seeing anywhere from $19,000 to $30,000 a square foot. It depends on the individual project.
Well,
As this project has a lot of specific elements that are not unique to the national average, I think it's very difficult to
right, so
on this project, say, compared to the national average. I think the plan that we have right now is very efficient. If you pull it out of the ground, like you said, at 342 square feet per parking space, the only way you can make that more efficient is to make it longer and stretch it.
So I won't compare it to the national average. The national average per square foot being $57 and the per space being $19,000. I won't compare it to the national average. I'll compare it to the Boston average, which is $67 per square feet and $22,368 per space. Again, that's still half of what this garage is. Now, and so say that perhaps that's the above ground averages for the Boston area. So if you look at the underground,
do they say what size garage that is? Because if you build a 200-car garage versus a 1,000-car garage, there's a significant amount of efficiency and economy and repetition. Should I show? I brought a couple slides.
all right, so just let me finish the train of thought. The Boston construction costs for an underground garage average is $95 per square foot. Above ground for construction costs per square foot, this is another study, $75 per square foot. Construction costs per space in the Boston area,
Yeah, those
underground $31,000, above ground $25,000. The $31,000 is the number you just told me, right? You said that that's what you're seeing is more like $30,000 per space. So that number is consistent with what you just
for
said.
this type of parking structure. That's kind of where I was going with this, to kind of give you a rough idea.
But again, we're looking at $41,000 per space.
This is a garage that we're working with Lee Kennedy right now. It's a big garage. It's 2,000 car parking spaces. It's less than that. This is 18,000 per level. But if you look at it, it's a very basic garage. Spread footings. It's a massive garage. But there's a significant economy through repetition on this parking structure. And that's why we're able to get those numbers down below those numbers. When you start looking at some of these other ones, you start
If I
at...
can just interrupt, we're doing a job in, off the expressway right now, that looks very similar to that, very plain vanilla, and it's about $29,000 per space.
All above
And it's
ground.
all above grade.
Yeah, these are all above grade too. And then you start going up the ladder, 26,000. This one's 28,000. This one is 30,000 because it's on contaminated soils, and we have to go with deep foundations.
So again, you have not circled around a price that's $41,000 per square. You just said that one's on contaminated soil and it's $30,000.
Here's one that's all above grade. Beautiful garage, 62,000 space, the most expensive above grade. It's in Connecticut. This one here has below grade parking, $120,000 a space.
All
These-
below grade.
Below grade, yes. So what you have a mix of all this going on your parking facility. So to compare it to national average is,
Well, it wasn't, I set
Right.
aside the national average, I was comparing the Boston average of $67 per square feet and 22,000 per space, and it's still double that.
but I just wanted to give you a rough idea. These are just some of the active projects that we're working on right now in South Boston, which are all below space. And we know that these range, starting from Fan Pier, the very first one was 67,000 a space, to the current
Well, that's
150
below, that's
Seaport,
underground next to
Right.
the ocean.
to give you a rough idea. But another driving factor here, which makes it very difficult, is the amount of construction that's going on in the New England area. Not just Boston, but around the area. This is going to give you a rough idea of the Seaport District 7 years ago. This is it right now. These are either buildings that have been built, that are being built, or being planned to build, being built. This is the Binney Street District in Cambridge. This is the MIT district in, over in Cambridge as well. These are just projects that we're involved with. We're only one firm. There's several more. I mean, the Alston project that Harvard's doing. My point is because of the economy right now and the construction, it's having a big impact on these costs as well. You know, and that's current today dollars. And Boston has always been in this market. People talk about a recession. I remember back in the 80s, we were extremely busy in the parking industry. So we're kind of an anomaly amongst all this. And so it's...
The one on in the bottom right that's facing me, the chart that's on the floor here, bottom right there, that's, what does it say?
That's the MPRTA Hero project.
Okay, that's in here, but when was that constructed?
That was constructed in 2009.
2009, okay.
Mhm.
And so you're saying between 2009 and 2018, the reason why there's such a difference, a 25% difference in cost?
No, the difference in cost for this one was because of the site.
It was on contaminated
Contaminated
soil.
soils, deep foundations, and it's also a smaller garage. This is about a 460-car garage.
So less economy of scale.
Exactly, and that's,
But that one's 31,000 a space, you said.
which one?
The one at the bottom right, the one we're talking about, the contaminated soil.
10 years ago.
Ava.
10 years ago, yeah.
Right, so that's what you're telling me, it's a 25% increase over the 10 years, and that's the
Well, the
static.
escalation right now is at 4% in the Boston area. Is that right? It's up there. Escalation's huge.
Okay. And so the reason why this is so much more expensive than any other garage that has been built previously that is an above ground, mostly above ground garage is due to inflation.
That contaminated soils,
We don't have contaminated soil, we have soil issues, right?
soil issues, you have relocation. I think there needs to be a degree of architectural sensitivity that has to be included with it. It's the current construction economy. They all come together.
And so is there a way to achieve a more economy of scale to get that $41,000? I mean, $41,000 a space, it's gonna be more expensive than any of the cars. The space is gonna cost more than any
Right,
of the cars.
exactly.
Parking it.
Like you
It's like the
suggested,
Taj Mahal garage.
you could pull it out of the ground, make it a 6-story garage.
Well, I'm fine with doing it. You tell me how much cheaper that's gonna be.
That's one way of doing it. You pull it out of the ground, but you have to be sensitive to the neighborhood too. And it's part of the planning process. There's a balance while the objectives that go into planning the parking facility.
So I
And
like
I
that.
think-
I'm on board with that, with what you said. It's, you know, it's a
If you take one
balance.
level off this garage, do you want that facing your neighbors? You know,
It's
these are
facing a
the
15-story building of luxury apartments. I think
which is
one
set
story
back.
on the garage is negligible. If you're gonna save $10,000 a space, you know, $20, $30.
These are all part of the objectives that have to go into the planning process.
Okay, well, we're in that process right now because we're being asked to pay for it. So, I mean, we weren't asked whether we want a 5-story, 6-story, 7-story, 4-story, underground, above ground. We're just being asked to pay for it. And now my request is, that is an expensive garage. From my particular point of view, I would like to know how we can reduce that cost per space from 41,000, the cost per square foot from 116, down to something that I would think is a little more in line with
I
other
think we've
garages.
answered that, right?
What's that?
Bringing it out of the ground, simplifying the architecture. Those are ways.
I would love to see what that looks like. I'm fine with that. Tell me how much it costs. I think that garage looks fine, it's a garage, you know, I mean,
I
the one thing is
don't know if
that
that meets the architectural sensitivity, I'm not an architect, and I think that's, has to be taken into context of the entire development, neighborhood, and all those things. I don't want to be the person that dictates that we need to do this just to save money. Is that the best possible solution?
No, we can do
I think
that,
you need to do something that, my opinion, that you're proud of, that attracts these people to this garage, that feel comfortable going into it. And this is more of a utilitarian that's associated with a corporate campus, not necessarily for the general public.
Yeah, I know, I mean, I hear your points, you're a professional in the industry, and you have, as you indicated earlier, a favorite garage. Garages to me are places to park.
This one's
you know,
obviously very inviting.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Yeah.
$61,000 a space, I don't want that garage. I would do two things you said. You want to attract people to a garage. I think what we build around it, and the community we have, and the way in which we run our city is what's going to attract people to the community, and they're going to have no choice but to park there, because that's going to be the only parking garage for a while. In terms of being proud of, I'd be more proud of saving the taxpayer $10,000 per space, you know, millions of dollars, than I would about an architectural feature on a garage. And I'm not, that's an important thing I know, you're a professional and you look at garages all day. To me, you want to see the best garage, and to me, a garage is a place to park my car so I can go do something else. So my primary focus is reducing that cost down from $41,000 a space and $116,000 a square foot. If it looks utilitarian, to me, and I only speak for myself, I don't know where the rest of the councils are, but if we can save millions of dollars, and it's a little less aesthetically pleasing, I'm okay with that, because we can pave some roads with that, we can improve our schools with that, we can do a lot more, to me, important things than something aesthetically pleasing. And I'm done after this, but if aesthetically pleasing was the only thing we cared about, we wouldn't be waiving all the art fund fees, right? Every project that's come in, we've said, oh, no, don't worry about it, you don't have to pay any of the art fund, because we don't, apparently the policy is, we don't care about the aesthetics, but now we get the Taj Mahal garage, and we gotta have all these beautiful aesthetics, it's gonna be one full story underground just because of the aesthetic. We've waived every single contribution to the Art and Public Space Fund for every project thus far. If we cared, as a community, as an administration, about aesthetics of the downtown, we would be funding that as we all agreed was important under the URDP. The mayor has waived that in every project that has come forward thus far. We have not charged anyone that fee, even though it's in the URDP, it's been waived. If we cared about aesthetics, we should have cared about it all along. It shouldn't just be now when it's, the difference between $10,000 a space, millions of dollars for a parking garage. So I thank you very much for your cooperation and educating me a little bit about garages tonight.